The battle for those final roster spots on the Toronto Blue Jays is finally starting to heat up as the Jays made some cuts yesterday. So we'll break that down on this episode of Jays Digest, as well as a Hyun-Jin Ryu injury update. He might be back sooner than we think, and an underrated prospect as well, making a name for himself with the Toronto Blue Jays. So we'll have that and much more coming up next. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. Now, before we get started today, Nick and I are super excited and humbled to announce our first ever sponsorship on the channel, and that's Queensway Automotive Group. And they have you covered for everything that you need to know about used or new cars, buying them, that is.
Yeah, and if you're wondering, who they are, it's pretty simple. They're a bunch of second and third generation car guys who love Toronto sports and reached out to us so we could, help them, and they're helping us. So it would mean a lot if you can click the link in the description, check it out, especially if you're looking for used cars, and it helps us a lot if you sign up and if you're interested in that. So make sure to do that. And again, thanks to Queensway Automotive, and it's great, and we're excited for what's to come there. But also make sure to hit the subscribe button before you get into the video. And we have a lot to get into today, so let's just get into the first topic, which is a big Blue Jays roster update. And Peter, like you said in the intro, the final roster spot is becoming easier and easier for us to decide who we think is going to make it. As I'll pop up a screenshot here, the Blue Jays assigned the following players to minor league spring training camp. 42 players remain in the big league camp, which includes 25 pitchers, 3 catchers, 9 infielders, and 4 outfielders. And I'll let you go through the players here who are reassigned and optioned, but Addison Barger is optioned, and I'll also go over what the difference between reassigned and option is after this. But what are your thoughts on the players here that got reassigned slash optioned?
Yeah, well, the difference between reassigned and optioned is that if you were optioned, it's because you were on the 40-man roster.
Yep.
And if you are reassigned, it's because you were not on the 40-man roster. So that's the difference between the two. But for any of you Addison Barger stands out there that wanted to see him on the opening day team, unfortunately, it's not going to happen. But he will get his time. It'll come soon, and he'll get his opportunity, and I think it'll come in 2023 as well. But yes, now the final roster spot for position players is down to Otto Lopez and Nathan Lucas, which we thought it would be just a couple weeks ago. We were kind of anticipating this, but now it's official, and I'm leaning more towards Otto Lopez, and I think you are too, Nick. But it's going to be an interesting battle. But the pitching is where it's very interesting because there are still a lot of pitchers left, but not that many spots left to be filled. So that'll be cool to monitor as the spring wraps up here.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, I agree with you with Otto Lopez, and I'll get in that in a second. But looking at the other guys here who are no longer going to be, with the big league club, that is Zach Britton, Winton Bernard, which is another interesting one, Phil Clark, Ernie Clement, who is a recent signing, Brandon Eisert, Julian Fernandez, Paul Fry, Drew Hutchison, Jackson Reeves, and Andrew Sosa. Any other of those guys that surprise you a little bit? Or are you pretty normal?
Well, I'm not shocked about Julian Fernandez, but I was really impressed with the way that he played in spring training. It's too bad he's not on the 40-man because he didn't really get a fair chance to make the team. There's just no room for him, and that speaks to the depth that the Blue Jays have. So I'm uh I'm excited to see how they do in the minor leagues, specifically Addison Barger. Ernie Clement is another name to monitor, another depth piece that the Jays could call up at any given time. But there's a lot more reinforcement than people seem to think in the Blue Jays minor league system. So I'm not worried too much if someone were to go down throughout the season because it's inevitably it's going to happen. 162 games, it's inevitable, and I expect some of those guys to play some major league minutes, major league time.
Yeah, I agree. And this is an interesting tweet from Josh Goldberg, and it kind of agrees with us. So the battle now, this was tweeted after the roster release. For the 26th spot on the Blue Jays roster is down to Otto Lopez versus Nathan Lucas. Lopez's versatility gives him the nod, probably thoughts, and I would agree. That's what we both agree with. And not only the versatility and the positional standpoint, but like you said, he hits from the right-handed side. He's going to hit better against lefties, at least in theory. And we have a lot of left-handed hitters now, especially in the outfield, which is kind of funny because it's the polar opposite of what we would have said last year after the season. But I think I'd go with Otto Lopez again. Any other final thoughts before I move on?
Yeah, I'd go with Otto Lopez as well. Not only because he's a right-handed hitter and plays the outfield, he runs well. He does everything on the baseball field, and we saw it in a primary role with Team Canada, the WBC. He was one of their top guys, and he was just performing day in, day out for that team, and almost carried them into the second round of the World Baseball Classic, and he could also play the infield. That's he's a mainly he is an infielder, so that's another thing to look at closely. Nathan Lucas, as good as he is in the outfield, he's kind of limited. He throws left-handed, so he can't play shortstop or second base or third base like Otto Lopez can. And if one of the infielders were to go down with an injury, Otto Lopez is probably first in line to take over some of that playing time as opposed to a guy like Addison Barger. So it makes sense as to why he's probably in the lead for that race for the final spot.
Yeah, I agree. And we kind of been saying that for the past month or so about Otto Lopez, that we think he took the lead, and he played great in the WBC, like you said. So it'll be interesting to see, and let us know your thoughts who you would rather, whether it be Nathan Lucas, Otto Lopez, or someone else. Maybe I know a lot of people were going for Winton Bernard there, but for a while, but he unfortunately got sent down. So we're gonna stick with our guess of Otto Lopez. But let's move on now into the second topic, which is a Hyun-Jin Ryu injury update. And Hyun-Jin Ryu has been one that people have been talking about for a while, and it's very, very interesting that, I know you, Peter, you've been on record saying that he necessarily isn't going to make an impact for the Jays this season, but I wonder if your thoughts have changed on that, as an article came out, basically an interview with Hyun-Jin Ryu, discussing, what his role might be for the Jays going forward, and he says, my goal, my ideal date is sometime in mid-July, Hyun-Jin Ryu on his recovery. And before I get into a little bit of the article and a couple of his quotes, I'll let you get your thoughts about that now.
I really think his role this year is just going to be to give some relief to that starting rotation. Maybe like on a day where you want to skip a start, where you want to give your five-man rotation an extra day of rest. I think that's what his main role is going to be. I don't expect him to make more than maybe 5 to 8 starts, and that's maybe being generous on the 8. So I don't see too much coming out of Hyun-Jin Ryu here. He's, I think, 36, 37 now. He might be 37 this year. And coming off of Tommy John surgery, that's never a good thing, especially when you're getting up there in age. He was a guy that didn't throw too hard prior to the injury, and I'm sure he doesn't throw as hard as he did just a couple years ago. So it's he kind of kick-started this revolution for the Toronto Blue Jays where they were getting out of that rebuild. He was the first big domino to sign with them, and then George Springer followed, Kevin Gausman followed. So we got to give him a lot of credit for starting the rebranding of the Toronto Blue Jays and what we know them as now. But I just don't see him making an impact in 23.
Yeah, I hope he does, and here's what he had to say. He basically said that my goal, my ideal date and time that I have set up for myself is sometime in mid-July. He said through an interpreter. I'm going to try to rehab myself to get back to being able to compete at that level by that time. Hopefully our team has a playoff chance and I can play through October with the guys. And he says that he's very confident in his Tommy John recovery. His mentality all along is, I know I can come back. And then the final thing I'll touch on, which was a very, wholesome thing of him to say. He said, being with the guys just brings so many positive vibes and helps me to be more motivated. In the next couple of weeks, the guys are going to be gone. I'm going to stay focused and not get laid back. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing with the mentality he has now and carry it from there. And the Jays won't rush it. There'll be a loose date in mind. Of course, that's a moving target. They'll be more focused on short-term boxes that need checking, moving from week to week with Ryu. But all signs at this point to be extremely encouraging. So, like you said, we hope that he does very, very well for the Blue Jays this year. We hope he can make an impact, maybe even in the playoffs as a long relief guy or something like that. But hopes aren't set too high just because of his age. But I wish nothing but the best for him and for the Blue Jays. And like you said, he started the rebuild, so it was a very, very, it's kind of sad to see it, the end of his contract now, but hopefully he makes some sort of an impact this year.
Yeah, it is sad to see, and he was a great pitcher with the Dodgers. He was great in that first season with the Toronto Blue Jays, but it all depends on how Jose Barrios and Yusei Kikuchi do in that rotation. If they are struggling and if they can't figure some things out throughout the regular season, then Yusei Kikuchi might be some added. Hyun-Jin Ryu might be an added reinforcement that really helps out the ball club. So hopefully they don't get in that situation where they have to rely on him. But in any way that he can contribute, I'm sure he'll help the team out. And just his veteran leadership presence, he knows how to win. He's been a part of winning ball clubs before. So anything that he could provide in terms of leadership and even play on the field is an added bonus at this point.
I agree, and let us know again in the comments what your thoughts are on him as we move on to the final topic, which is a quick one. Potential underrated prospect, an article released today about Rainier Nunez. If you're unfamiliar with him, maybe you know him from the walk-off double rocket that he hit earlier in spring training, but I'll pop up the screenshot now. Just an article about him. I just want to have a quick discussion with Peter and you guys as well. Basically, Swelling made an article saying Ryan Nunez is 6'4", 240 pounds. This spring he's hit an opposite field homer off Garrett Cole and a 114-mile-per-hour walk-off. He has the biggest bat in the Jays organization after Vladdy, and they call him the Mosquito. And then we had Ben Wagner, who's been at the spring training site, and been watching him play. Say, this is the guy I've been talking about for weeks. Good stuff from Aaron Zwelling here. And Peter, I'll just get your quick thoughts and just some discussion about Ryan Nunez before we wrap up here. And he could be an underrated prospect that maybe we haven't talked about enough.
That's a little bit of a reach in my opinion. The biggest bat in the system after Vladimir Guerrero Jr., maybe stature wise, maybe because he's 6'4", 240 pounds. That could be a reason why, but he hits the ball hard and he showed a lot of power in the minor leagues last season. It's going to be interesting to see what he can do in Double-A this year because I assume he's going to start there and maybe even get some time in Triple-A if he performs over there. But I think the biggest bats in the system got to be Aroldis Martinez and Addison Barger at this point, right?
Yeah, I'd assume maybe they're talking about, frame or pure power, though you think Elvis maybe has the lead there. But if they're talking about frame, then I guess there's probably no arguing it unless you maybe make a Brandon Belt
Yeah,
argument, but he's obviously not
he's
in the
bigger than
system.
Vladdy
Yeah,
if
it's
we're
huge.
talking
But
frame.
I wanted to bring him up. Maybe I honestly don't doubt that he'll either be brought up again, whether that's in trade talks some point down the line or in a potential call-up. I just wanted to bring it up and get some discussion in the comments. But that'll wrap up the video. Thanks again to Queensway Automotive for the sponsorship. And we couldn't do it without you guys watching the video. So we thank you guys for that. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you in tomorrow's stream and video.
Yeah, thanks to Queensway.